Welcome to The Hill's Coronavirus Report. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Each day we are interviewing consequential leaders and innovators in the battle against the coronavirus. According to Forbes, over the past 100 days, there's been a sizable increase in cybersecurity breaches. The report says impersonation was up by almost a third, spam notifications up more than 25%, and the use of malware also spiked. Those numbers pushed overall detections up by a third. Scammers read the paper too, and the Justice Department has already shut down hundreds of fake websites promising cures or stimulus money. If that's not enough, terrorist threats have also surged during the pandemic. One member of Congress has long stressed the need for a cogent and strong cybersecurity plan. He's been an advocate of encryption for consumers in addition to data protection. In fact, he's just sort of the smart tech guy all around. From the great state of Texas, a former undercover officer of the CIA representing the 23rd Congressional District, welcome Congressman Will Hurd. Will, great to be with you today. I wanted to start out, what this coronavirus has done is it has shaken up the system. It's shown us what is wobbly, shown us what is vulnerable. And I know you and I were talking the other day that recovery is the wrong way to look at this. Tell me how you look at it.
You know, when people say recovery, that makes me think that we want to get back to a place and time, let's say November of 2019, right? And I get that, and we talk about getting back to normal. But once we get out of this, I want to be better than when we went through it. And we have the opportunity to do that. You talked about how, malware attacks are up, spammers are increasing their activity, people are clicking on scams where it's saying if you're a salesperson you can get additional money in your stimulus refund, right? And so these scammers are going to continue to operate, and we should be putting things in place to take advantage and protect ourselves from this and use some of the federal dollars that we're going to be spending to help states, cities, and municipalities better defend themselves against these kinds of scams. But also, how can we help modernize the infrastructure of states, cities, and counties to deliver better citizen-facing services, right? We know the decisions that we made when it came to unemployment. We increased the federal piece of unemployment $600 a month for, I believe it was 3 or 4 months. But what happened was the states workforce commissions who deliver and take in the request for unemployment, they didn't have the capacity to deal with the increase. Some of them didn't even have the ability to do a 1-800 number for people to check in on their requests. We should be making sure that these workforce commissions are moving into the cloud so that you have data in a way that can be used in a better fashion, where you can check on your claim. These are some of the ideas we should be thinking of. Let's take education. How do you do teaching in an online environment? Some schools, I was talking to some folks that run a charter school in New York City. They had 98% attendance every day in their digital classes. I've talked to some schools in Texas where you have 3%. We need to make sure we have the infrastructure so that we can do this online class. And so when I talk about where we're going, I get the term recovery, and that's the last phase of dealing with the pandemic. But I want to think about advancements, right? And how do we come better out of this?
Right. I think that's an important frame. I know that people are stressed right now. You and I were talking about food bank lines. We were talking about you visiting a mask cleaning factory and how important. And I'm just interested, what is the temperature like? Not physically outdoors, but the temperature of people, their frustration or their confidence that things are going to begin moving forward in your district.
I would say people are just unsure, right? Folks want to get back to their routines. They want to get out of their house. A lot of people now want to get back to work. They realize how much they like being around people multiple hours out of the day. And they're looking for guidance and making sure that our elected officials are using the advice from our medical professionals and scientists to make sure that we can get back to our way of life in a smart way. And let's just take testing. We all know the importance of testing. Right now in my hometown of San Antonio, we have additional testing capacity, meaning we could be testing more people. Not enough people are coming out and testing. So, how do we make sure that our communities get to a point where anybody can get tested? Because that's important, because it's the asymptomatic people that have COVID-19 that are contributing to community spread. And so being able to be in a place where you have the infrastructure to do that. I this mass cleaning facility that I saw, they can do 80,000 masks in 6 hours. And the N95 masks, which are needed for health workers, can be cleaned 20 times. So we're basically increasing our supply by a
Right.
factor of 20. And how do we make sure that hospitals know about this, are using it and getting access to these kinds of things? So we need to be putting these processes in place. But look, I've been out and seen people going and doing takeout. Restaurants are open in many restaurants are open in Texas, and there's social distancing, and seeing people do that in a smart way.
But Congressman, you think we're getting this right? I mean, I'm, I mean, you're a member of the federal government. You're a member of Congress, and I have to say that a lot of people are not too impressed with the role the federal government has played. They haven't seen, the best practices, standards go out in a way, and a lot of people are wondering, when are we going to stop talking about testing and actually have it ever present, so that anyone can have it, just as you said. I mean, we don't even have it here in Washington, D.C. So I'm interested in how you would critique the government, how, if you were in an executive role, you would say, here are the things we need to begin moving right now.
So I think it's not been uniform, right? I think that's the frustration. I just gave the examples of how here in Texas we have an oversupply of tests because we're not having enough people come in and getting tests. Where in some communities you don't have that access. Part of that is the interaction between the federal government and state and municipalities. My perspective of dealing with HHS, Health and Human Services, CDC, and FEMA here on the ground in Texas. I would give them, I've had great
Mm.
experiences with them when we needed. I had a community that literally ran out of PPE at a hospital. They were literally had only hours of supplies left. We were able to help them get the resources, and that was working through FEMA that were based here in
Yeah.
Texas. I recognize that those relationships are not the same in other places. I think here locally, the relationships between cities and counties are incredibly important, and San Antonio has a great working relationship. So I think some of this has come down on those relationships on the ground, and look, making sure that right information is being communicated. Let's take what the federal government did when it came to PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. The whole point of the Paycheck Protection Program was to make sure small businesses were able to keep people on the payroll. And if
Mm.
you keep people on the payroll, they don't have to go on unemployment. Yes, where some people applied and got access to those funds that shouldn't have, that happened, right? It shouldn't have happened. It did. But the Secretary of Treasury is taking steps to get that money back so it goes to people that need it. But in that first tranche of Paycheck Protection Program loans, 134,000 came to Texas businesses, and the payroll of most of those, the average payroll of those businesses was less than $60,000 a month. And so those programs were working, and the fact that we were able to distribute $350 billion worth of B in 8 days. I think that was a success. Did the program need to be tweaked? Absolutely. So if I was doing this,
Mm.
the goal should be anybody can show up to a drive-through facility and they can get the diagnostics test, which is the COVID-19. Do you have COVID-19 or not? And you get the serological test, the test for the antibodies, and you process the COVID-19 test first. If it's positive, then you're notified. If
Mm.
it's negative, then you do the analysis on the serological test. I think we need to improve the way we do contract contact tracing, and can you do greater notification of a community? So if you know somebody who gets COVID-19 was shopping at one store at a particular time, should that entire community be notified of that? You can do this in a way where you're protecting the civil liberties of that individual.
Right.
Apple and Google are working on how do you do this in a technological way so we can move that faster. But these are the areas that we should be trying to get online as quickly as possible.
Now, I know you've been worried also about the food supply chain, vulnerable communities. Your party has not been friendly, if I may say so, to programs like SNAP and have been rolling them back, at least my view. What do you think needs to happen by way of securing the supply chain, but also looking at people who are just really on the precipice of disaster, of not being able to access food?
Look, food security is national security. That's why I'm concerned and pay attention to it. And I'm especially concerned about our kids. No kid should be able to go hungry. And so what is happening in a lot of communities, the only time a kid gets a square meal is when they're at school, right? And now that schools are closed, how do you ensure those kids are getting those 2 square meals? Well, the way the system, the free and reduced lunch program is designed, it's designed to provide that kid a meal, not food, an actual meal, right? And so now that there, many school districts, like one of my school districts here in San Antonio, Northside Independent School District, has gone through some Herculean efforts to try to deliver those meals to those kids. But we're seeing that in some places, less than 25% of the kids that are on free and reduced lunch are actually accessing these programs. How do we fix that? It's a thing called the pandemic EBT, pandemic electronic benefits transfer. This is basically SNAP funding.
Let me just restate that. It's pandemic electronic benefits transfer.
Yes.
Okay.
The official title of food stamps is electronic benefits transfer.
I
right?
see. And so that's the SNAP program?
That is. And so if you have a Lone Star in Texas, it's called a Lone Star card. It's a card that has, your food stamps on it. You can go to a grocery store and use it like a credit card. So what PEBT does, it says if you have a child that is on free reduced lunch, we're going to add additional money to your ability to go out and buy that food in the grocery store to make sure kids are fed. And that's if a parent is already on SNAP. Now, if you're not, then through this PEBT designation, which goes state by state, if your kid is on free and reduced lunch, then you're going to be able to get a SNAP benefits in order to make sure your kids eat. This is something. Again, we should be able to do this with the click of a switch.
Right.
The infrastructure for the state entities that deal with this, the money comes from the federal government, but the state entities are the ones that run it. And how do you have systems that talk to each other and can move quickly? This is important because the reason you're having now more people go to the food banks, right, is they're either on unemployment, their kids can't get it, and you're having these long lines. And my fear is when you have these long lines at food bank and the food bank runs out of money, what happens, right? When you lose hope of being able to feed your children, that's where pandemonium starts. And so making sure these are in essence inefficiencies within the system that we can improve. This is something that I'm working on. And I'm glad there's guys like Jose Andres that are working on this as well too. And there's a little nuance we're working on with FEMA, making sure FEMA can pay for the food 100% and not have a match from the local communities, which is how it works.
So this is the FEED Act that just got discussed. Are you a sponsor of the FEED Act?
I am. I'm an original co-sponsor
That's great.
Of that piece of legislation.
Last question. I need to go geopolitical. China. How much culpability does China have in all that we're seeing here? We know that the virus came from there, but this is beyond that, really. And what should we be doing now? Many people are saying, hey, this is the wrong time to have a trade war. This is the wrong time. We need a global cooperative effort to deal with the virus. Where are you right now in both what you think of China and what our actions now should be, or should we be delaying action so that we can get some global coordination and collaboration in rolling back the devastation of this virus?
we need that global collaboration in order to deal with this virus, which means you need transparency from all governments, including the government of China. And we know that the government of China hasn't been transparent at the beginning of this crisis, because we know it originated there. I think organizations like the WHO are important to deal with this global pandemic, but we should be getting our allies and the other members of the WHO to be asking the WHO to get these answers from China. And we also now have to understand, what is China trying to do right now? We know that the Chinese government is trying to surpass the United States of America as the sole superpower in this world by 2049. 2049 is important because that's when they mark 100 years of communist rule in mainland China. And we now are seeing their increase in aggressive disinformation campaigns, saying this started by the US government and the army, saying this originated in Italy, trying to distract not only their own populace from the Communist Party's response to this, but also trying to erode trust within Europe and with some of our other allies, of saying, hey, the United States is not a reliable partner to deal with this. We're the better partner. So this disinformation campaign that we're seeing coming from China should be viewed in their long-term geopolitical interest of surpassing the United States. And they view that where we are right now in this global pandemic is an opportunity for them to supercharge their activity to surpass the United States. So you can't, if we're all going to be cooperative in dealing with this, then everybody has to be cooperative, and that includes the Chinese government. And that's where I think we should be strengthening our alliances with the EU and those individual countries, and using international forum like the WHO to press for greater transparency.
Well, Congressman Will Hurd, thank you so much for your candor and thoughts today, and be well in Texas, and we'll look forward to seeing you back in Washington when you can get back here and we can actually meet in person. And thank all of you for joining me today. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.